Hello again, this is of course Dr. Jimmy, and it is still the afternoon of Tuesday, March 14th, 2017, and I think I have time to do at least another video in my series on the history of the event Universal Orlando Halloween Horror Nights 25. Lenny is over there looking out the window. She sees a bird or a lizard or something. Yeah, she's very interested in that. Cats are predators, of course. They like to stalk and kill their prey. So let her, damn nature, you scary. And they live up to that. Even though she's really a sweet, gentle cat in all ways as far as human beings are concerned. Because she's too small to eat us. Although I'm sure she thinks about it. Because that's what cats do. Although Lenny's not an evil cat, like a certain beloved cat that is no longer with us. Lenny is a wonder cat. She's a good girl. She's out to save the world. Yes. Okay, not to conquer it, but to save it. Now, where was I? In my previous video, part 1, this is part 2, my previous video, part 1 of the history of Horror Nights 25, I got up to the point where we found out that there was not going to be a Scream house, but a Purge house instead. And it really happened at the very last minute. So much last minute that I think that maybe the paint that they had used for graffiti in the new Purge house might have been a little bit damp on the opening night of the event. But before we get to that opening night, there was another thing they did a little early for those of us who happen to have Universal Annual Passes, the Universal Orlando Annual Pass holders, UOAP, yes. You see, they had a new idea about merchandise for Halloween Horror Nights 25. Because it was an anniversary year, they made all kinds of new merchandise, bigger and better than ever before, and they decided to have a special dedicated shop. It had already been determined that an attraction, Twister, would be closing that autumn. In fact, it closed right about the same time the event ended, I think, either in early November or late October. And when Twister ended, but the gift shop for Twister closed earlier than that. Yes. They took out the Aftermath shop and returned it into a special dedicated shop just for Horror Nights merchandise. For the first time, there was a special Horror Nights shop, and they opened it earlier than anticipated. On Wednesday, that would have been the 16th, I believe, of September, the shop was opened only to Universal team members and to annual pass holders in a special sale on Wednesday morning. And so those of us who got to go in on that opening day of the sale got to buy our swag, our Universal Halloween Horror Nights 25 memorabilia, a couple of days before the event even began. And that was lots of fun. And whilst at the little shop, I noticed the t-shirt, the house shirt for Halloween Horror Nights 25. And there were 9 houses that year, but there were only 8 houses on the shirt. Oh my, yes. They didn't have time to take the Scream off the shirt and replace it with the Purge, you see. All they were able to do was to get Scream off the shirt, and then in order to, because they had Jack Presents at the top, and then they had 4 columns, columns of 4 houses on either side, so you had 8 and 9 on top was the original idea. It would have been Scream on the bottom and The Walking Dead at the very bottom of those 4 columns, but when they had to take Scream away, they didn't have a graphic to put up for the Purge. That's why it didn't show up until the very last minute. So what could they do to put something there? Very quickly, what they did was they took the Walking Dead logo and expanded it across the bottom of the T-shirt. So you had Jack Presents, and then you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 no, wait a minute. Yeah, so you had 6, you had 7 houses then, and on the bottom you had The Walking Dead across the bottom, enlarged, so you only had 8 houses on the shirt instead of 9, because they didn't have time to get the purge on the shirt. That's how last minute it was. In fact, the fact that they were able to get Scream off the shirt before it was time to sell it, that was pretty amazing. But they couldn't, you know, put the purge on in time. Alright then, so let's get to the event itself. Universal Orlando Halloween Horror Nights 25, as I said, began actually on the evening of Friday, September 18th, 2015. And it ran on the evenings of the September 18th, 19th, 24th, 25th, 26th, and 27th. And then proceeded into October on the dates of October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, the 28th, the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st Halloween night, and then November 1st. So the event actually ran for 30 nights, the most nights they ever had for a Halloween Horror Nights event up to that point. So again, this was the most nights ever. Wow. And that wasn't the only thing. In previous years, the events would be held on the less peak nights. They would close the park at midnight. It'd open at about 6:30. Sometimes it'd open earlier, around 6 o'clock. Sometimes even before 6 o'clock. But when they open it, then they would close it up at midnight, right? Officially it starts at 6:30. But at midnight, right? And then on the peak nights, it'd be at 1 a.m. And on certain peak nights, usually the nights you can't use your express pass, I'm sorry, in the years you can't use your frequent fear pass, you know, usually Saturday nights would be open maybe to 2 a.m. So you have 3 closing times, and that's the way it had been for quite some time. But that all changed in 2015. For the first time ever, there were no midnight closings. The event was open till 1 a.m. on the slower nights and 2 a.m. on the peak nights. Wow, they added more hours to the event as well as adding more days, more nights. So it really was huge, amazing. And the earliest start date ever, they never started anywhere as early as September 18th before. The earliest night before had been, I think, September 19th. So they started an earlier day. They went all the way to November 1st. Pretty spectacular. Now, as I said, there were 9 haunted houses for the very first time. So now let's start talking about those very haunted houses. And the first haunted house was located in Soundstage 21. Let me double check. It seems to me okay, that was not a new location. It had been used twice before. Alright, never mind. So Soundstage 21 was the first location. And it's a very big soundstage. And they were able to fit in a massive house, what they call an Uber house, a mega house, like The Walking Dead the year before. This, however, was one of the original houses that year. Let's see, were there 3 original houses? I think so. Let's see, 1, 2. No, there were 4 original houses. Okay, but that was one of the original houses. It was called Jack Presents. 25 years of monsters and mayhem. It was the Retrospective house, covering the history of the event of Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando. And of course, was about Jack the Clown, because Jack was indeed the icon of the event. I forgot to show you before. These, of course, are the brochures. This is the 1 a.m. closing brochure with a close-up of Jack's face. And this, of course, is the 2 a.m. closing brochure, as you can see there. And I forgot to mention... Oh, what happened? I don't know what happened there. Everything went black for a minute. Hopefully everything's fine. But I forgot to mention about Jack. He was brought back as the new icon. He was, of course, last seen as an icon in 2000. Well, not really as the icon. He was last seen in 2010 as one of many icons, but Fear was the main icon. He had last been an icon for the event, I believe, in 2007, although he'd been in park in 2010 along with the others, and had little cameo appearances, but not as a person scare actor, but as a mannequin in Cabin in the Woods, and later as a sort of painting, a sort of photo diagram on the wall in Giggles and Gore. But now he was back in the flesh as the actual icon, and they updated his appearance, as I'm trying to show you here. As you can see, they changed his face. They made it a little more weathered, a little older. His nose, it's all kind of corroded, and his hair has gotten, you know, it's like streaks of grey in it almost. It's actually blonde streaks in the red hair, but it almost looks like Jack is getting older and more haggard looking. They got rid of the ringmaster outfit. They gave him a new leather jacket, sort of like a rock star, but it has these straps across the front. And I can't help but wonder if it was meant to be, you know, a leather straitjacket from an asylum that had been retooled into his sort of jacket, because it kind of had that feel to it. So they gave him a bit of a new look, you know, gets rid of the old look. So this is his third look, really, from the original clown outfit to the ringmaster outfit to this one. So that was the icon. So he's now presenting this retrospective house. And when you go in, the facade is spectacular. It's a circus tent, this magnificent circus tent, like you're going to see a sideshow at a circus, and Jack's face is painted on the front with big pointy teeth. Ooh, sharp pointy teeth, rather scary. And there's these big turning posters. They're on several different platforms, and they're turning, and you can see posters of the different icons who are going to be in shows in the sideshow of the circus you're going to. And there's like barrels and popcorn boxes strewn about, and trees, like you're going into this where this circus has been set up. And so you see on one side there's a little picture of the caretaker and the usher and the storyteller and the director. All of their pictures are seen on this, but you also see pictures of Cindy and Eddie as well. Interestingly enough, not all of those characters are actually in the house. Specifically, the usher and the director didn't make it into the house. Why? Well, I have my theories, and it's possible they had scenes originally planned to feature them that were removed because they ran out of time or budget to build them. There was a long space at the end of the house that was just going through black curtains before he got to the exit, and maybe that's where director and usher scenes might have been. I don't know, but for some reason they're not in the house, but everybody else that we saw are in the house. When you first go in the tent, you are taken back to the Hallow again, so you get lots of little scenes of old houses. The house from Horror Nights 18 in 2008, you're in the jack-o'-lantern room, and all the creepy jack-o'-lanterns are glowing, and the smell of decaying earth. When you come out of that, one of the jack-o'-lantern head creatures comes out and pops out at you. Then the next bit is Scary Tales, of course. Scary Tales, which had started originally in 2001 and came back in 2002, and most gloriously, the Scary Tales house, The Nightmare Continues. Oh, no, that's not it. I keep saying that. It's Once Upon a Nightmare. Yeah, Once Upon a Nightmare in 2008. So it does reference those houses in some ways. You walk out into a forest, and there's a caravan on one side and a beautiful cottage on the other side. And here's Red Riding Hood, and she's killed. You see a carcass when you first go out. It looks like a decapitated wolf. What's that? And then coming up is Red Riding Hood from behind the caravan. She's got the wolf's head. So she's killed the wolf. She's like a warrior Riding Hood. And then as you go into the cottage, you see a rather creepy little green man effigy on the... What is that about? I'm not quite sure, but it's creepy. And you go into the cabin. It's the cabin of the three bears. Now remember, back in 2008, there was a really cool Three Bears Goldilocks sequence. When you go in this, though, Goldilocks is gone. She's already been eaten. You've got this room that Baby Bear's little high chair is there, but you don't see Baby Bear. Where is Baby Bear? I don't know. But Mama Bear, this huge, enormous puppet bear like the wolves from American Werewolf, this gigantic bear is there coming in the room from the window, and she's chewing on Goldilocks' remains and growls at you, saying, wow, you're impressed by this growly, savagey bear. And you turn to go to the next scene, and all of a sudden, coming out of a doorway is Papa Bear. Huge, enormous, gigantic bear. And scares the bloody crap out of you. Now this was the return of the three bears from the year before, but now they have Mama and Papa together, and you're kind of caught between them for a second. But here's the thing. This became a thing on Twitter. Someone started a HHN bear Twitter and said that when you come through my house, if you shout bear, 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 chant bear, 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 I will do a dance for you. Now, the scare actor who played the bear did not actually do this Twitter. I have a pretty good idea who it was, and that person wasn't actually working there, but the person who played the bear saw the Twitter and played along with it. So when you went in there, and if you were in the know and you started shouting, bear, 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 the bear would come out and he would dance for you as you are going through there. It was quite delightful. And he'd remember to do that when you chanted. And so that became a highlight and became a huge favourite. And HHN Bear Twitter lasted for months, even after the event was over. That he says, oh, I'm going to hibernate now. And occasionally he popped back in during the Academy Awards, for example, when The Revenant was up for Academy Award. He said he was the bear in that movie, and people have made other Twitters like HHN Duck and some stupid things, but they've never ever met the fan popularity of HHN Bear, and it still sometimes pops up on Twitter to this day, and it's remarkable that the bear, who was only a minor character in the house, suddenly became this big deal. And even Michael Aiello was amazed by it on Twitter, that this bear became this huge thing. And it's just hysterical. And I love the bear. It kind of made the house for me. It made the house one of my favorite houses of all time. And we didn't even call it, some of my friends, when we would go, oh, what house are we going to do next? Let's see Bear. You know, we wouldn't say go see Jack or 25 Years of Monsters Mayhem. We just called the house Bear, to go in and see the bear, yes. So that was it. Bear! Wonderful. Oh, almost unbearable. Well, after you pass the HHN Bear, you go into the Forsaken, I believe. They recreated that lovely scene where you're walking through the boat on a tilt, but they added a couple extra figures. A lot of kind of static figures. Some are really grisly of the Forsaken seamen with their glowing eyes, and it was much better than the first scene from the original house back in 2011. Actually, and you're walking on a tilt and they come leaping out and bunging at you. It's all quite delightful. A good recreation of that scene. Then you go into, and I also want to point out, as you went from scene to scene, very often there'd be a little brief interlude where Jack would be there, and sometimes he'd be putting on his makeup or just pop out from behind. And it was evolving as you went through. You started with Jack in his original clown suit from 2000, and then you would see Ringmaster Jack, and eventually you'd get to the new version of Jack near the end of the house. Now, the opening weekend they hadn't got all the masks, and so the Jacks were like without makeup until you got near the end. It was like, what does this mean? Is this Jack before he puts his makeup on? But the fact is, they just didn't get it, and by a couple of weeks later, they had, you know, everything back the way it should be, and they had the actual makeup, so that made it a lot better. Well, I believe the next scene was in homage to a couple of different houses that were set in haunted houses, like Dead End and the Wyandotte Estate, kind of mixing bits and pieces of both of them, and also a bit of the Scream House. So you go through a corridor, and you've got a big painting of Jack up on the wall, and you have the ghost in the wall, like you had in the Wyandotte Estate, floating. And on the other side, there's a screaming face like Captain Howdy, and there's actually a character in a white face that's sort of like the ones that popped up in The Exorcist last year, comes out and as well. And there was even a floating ghost above you in the ceiling. That was amazing. So you see all of that. Then you go into a conservatory, seen like it was in Dead End, and it's set up. Remember where they had the tree things come out? You know, there's some of the tree garden things, but there's also a great coffin. It's being set up for a funeral, like a funeral parlor, and there's a coffin. And of course, at this funeral, we have the caretaker. So is the caretaker there to mourn Cindy, or is it someone else in the coffin? We're not quite sure. The caretaker pops up from that illusion like they had in Dead End, where it's a mirror and you don't see him till you walk past a point, and suddenly he's right there in your face like he materialized. Really clever effect. But as you go to the end of the room, they have a funeral wreath on the wall and a picture of who's in the coffin. It's the storyteller. It's the storyteller's funeral. Is she dead now? Is the caretaker mourning her? Does that mean there was something going on between the two of them? I don't know. But it's sort of a weird implication. Then as you go in the next room, there's Cindy. She pops out of a coffin the way Snow White did in the old Scary Tales house and screams at you. So Cindy's still alive, at least, or if she ever was, living dead, right? Yak! It's a great scene. All right, then you see a little bit more of Jack, and then it's Universal Classic Monsters, I think, was next. I might be a bit off, but there were Universal Classic Monsters in the house, and so you have scenes of the Universal Classic Monsters. You've got Frankenstein in his laboratory. Later on the final night, there was something in that room that was never exposed unless you went on a behind-the-scenes tour, you know, unmasking the horror, and that's a little family portrait of the Munsters. But that was put out to a display on the last night of the event. Last night was a great run in that house because the bear started hugging some of the people who went through on multiple occasions. So you got to get a bear hug if you were someone who was recognized as a fan who had been through many, many times. And I went through with J.W. Kent, and he almost got suffocated under that big bear rug. And so that little thing was set up so you could see what had been hidden. And likewise, one of the Forsaken sailors had a parrot on his shoulder that wasn't there until the last night. I thought that was funny. There's a parrot. Arr! So, little inside jokes they threw in for the last night. But on the Universal Classic Monsters, you had Frankenstein, then you had popping up through a window the Wolfman, and if you look past him in the trees, and there's a sky in the back, and there's a full moon, it's quite beautiful. And the bride and the Phantom in the bride comes out as well. Then you have the Phantom of the Opera and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo, who's rarely appeared at Horror Nights Universal, though he was at Fright Nights the first year in the street and on a show. But now, here he is in a haunted house, and they've got bell poles, you know, and he's there, and so, and the Phantom is playing his organ, and so you have both of them, and then you go through, similar to the House of Horrors in 2011, where you go into a little crypt with the mummy, and the mummy's there. Ooh, scary, so you get to see all the Universal Classic Monsters. Then, after meeting Jack again, you move on, after meeting Jack again, you get to a scene for Dracula, and it features the brides of Dracula. Or is this a reference to Castle Vampire? Because what they recreated was, in fact, the notorious bed scene, where you had the three hot chicks in the bed together, and you know, sometimes you might need an armed guard there to keep someone from diving into the bed with them, but this time they had set up, you know, sort of a barricade, and they're trying to lure you. It says, and one of them recognized me, says, Jimmy, come. We like you. You're so sexy. And it's like, no, 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 no. I don't swing that way. I'm not the right blood type anyway. Get someone younger and healthier. His blood tastes better than mine, you know. And but it was originally inspired by the scene from Bram Stoker's Dracula, where Keanu Reeves was tempted by the three brides in the bed like that. So there's that lovely castle vampire Brides of Dracula scene. The Count himself made no appearance, though, unfortunately. Don't know why. So going past that, you then get into Gothic and Nightingales. Now, both at once, sort of, because you go into Gothic and it's the famous looking over down into the cathedral scene. And on the other side, of course, we have gargoyles in the roof and on the side to pop out and scare you. And this time, one of the gargoyles was absolutely 100% a weeping angel from Doctor Who. Absolutely, not just sort of, but absolutely the actual weeping angel right in the wall there. Ah! You know, don't blink. And there are some other gargoyles, and when you look down into the cathedral, something came bursting through the wall. It's a tank. It's the tank from Nightingales. So somehow Nightingales and Gothic got mashed up a little bit. Then one of the gargoyles is, you know, on a rope on the other side of where you're looking down. So while you're looking down, looking at the tank, the gargoyle pops up in front of you. Ah! And then you go into Nightingales right after that. It's not much. But you do see a little bit of the Nightingales and a dead soldier, although the dead soldier disappeared after a couple of nights and never came back. I don't know why. But you go through some of the trenches and the Nightingales are there after you. Then another interlude with Jack, who's continuing to morph, now going into a ringmaster. I think this is where they had the dressing room and the mirror. So he's become the ringmaster Jack. And then you have scenes from, let's see, what was next? Oh yeah, I think it's meant to be, it's Havoc, Dogs of War. So you go into these industrial-like rooms, and there's like a dog up there with a machine gun shooting at you, female, and then you come around, and there's one with a chainsaw right there after you, with his, you know, Bane mask, you know. So go to Dogs of War, and then it's to Christmas-themed room. Some people thought it was meant to be HR Blood and Guts, but HR Blood and Guts isn't there. It might also be a reference in a weird way to Home for the Holidays, and in some ways it might even be, you know, Christmas in Cary, Ohio, with people from Leave It to Cleaver, because what you had was this guy dressed in a suit wearing a Santa hat and a pair of glasses with a chainsaw. I'm not quite sure who he was. He wasn't Blood and Guts, but he was some sort of Christmas maniac, and a little elf popping along with her chainsaw as well, attacking you while Christmas music, Run DMC of all things, you know, Christmas in Hollis, Queens, is playing very loudly. So you've got that little chainsaw episode. I think that's pretty much it for those rooms, because after that you go through, oh, next is Jack. So you then go into a large room, and Jack the Clown is there again and again. It's like full of Jacks. Most of these are mannequins, but a couple of them aren't. There's one Jack near the front, clown, original clown suit Jack. He actually took my hat one day, put it on his head. Fortunately, he did give it back. There was also some ringmaster Jacks along the other side, and one of those was alive too. There was something about a chest of stuff. Oh yeah, there was a chest of like, you know, circus props and some balls, you know, like the balls they use that they balance on and stuff, like beach ball type things, but some of them were not entirely inflated. I could not help but make a joke about a certain football player at that point. Oh look, deflated balls. The Patriots must have been in here. So after that, you go through some corridors where Jack is popping out from either side, including finally the final form of Jack in his leather jacket, the new Jack for Halloween Horror Nights 25. Then you go through many rooms or long corridors of just black curtains, and it's like something's missing. And that's why I've heard rumors that maybe that's where there was meant to be a scene of the director and the usher in a new scene they never got to do. I don't know if that's true or not. It could just be that this was just to get you out of that soundstage, because they've done that with some other houses and sound stages last year. They have a long corridor with black curtains before you actually get into the house or at the end of it. So they did that thing. But when you finally came out, the house wasn't done yet. There was some props from over the years set up here, and what looked like a little butcher shop thing, all kinds of body parts and props, wolf heads, other items from different haunted houses over the years. And there was a final chainsaw scare at the end. And depending on what night and what set, what cast, you might have Eddie pop out behind the first one with his chainsaw and chase you out of the house. Otherwise, on the other side, coming out of the meat shop, was Meaty Meats from Leave It to Cleaver, the big head, and he would chase you out. I don't think they were ever both there at the same time. At least I never saw them both at the same time. Usually it was one or the other. But either way, you got a nice chainsaw exit. There was a little bit of time near the end of the event where apparently there's some fumes from the chainsaws. I guess they were using real ones. It was a little bit out in the open. You were actually outdoors in this area, but it still collected, and so they had to take Eddie out for a few days. When they did, they put him into the run house, where he originally wasn't meant to be, for one or two evenings. I didn't get to see him in Run, but I heard about it. And then they put him into the Icon Scare Zone, and he tended to be there quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. And then, of course, he got back into Jack. I think the last weeks you're more likely to see Meaty Meats. But either way, both Eddie and Meaty Meats were part of Jack's Funhouse, 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem. So I've reached the end of this video, and so whenever I get around to doing the next one, I'll start with the next house, which was the repeat of American Werewolf in London. But it might not be today, because here in Winter Park there's an election, and I have to go vote, because that's democracy. Even nowadays we still have to vote, because we're trying to keep democracy alive, even though some people seem to be doing their best to stop it. Thank you very much.